Hello everyone. In this video I want to talk about a couple things to look for when you actually are out and shopping for a used longboard. Over here, that's a longboard I just bought, and this actually is a Globe Pinner Classic, and this is the older version that they came out a few years back. The only thing they changed over the years is pretty much just graphics. Like, the overall design haven't changed much. So I'm gonna use this board that I just bought to tell you guys when you go out, go on OfferUp and go on Letgo, go on eBay, Craigslist, buying a used longboard, like what to look for. Obviously different longboards is gonna be different, but the general rule all applies. Okay, so the very first thing you want to look for is to see if there are any rusts on the longboard, especially around the bolts right over here, and around the bolts right over here, and also the mounting bolts for the trucks. Those bolts, if you ever see any rust, that means the board are probably being used in the rain, and that is no good, because the rain also affects the actual bearing in the board. Those bearings, once they get rusty, it's really hard to restore. The rusted hardware, any rusted hardware on the board can be replaced fairly easily. The bearing, you just need new bearings if you buy a board that have rusted bearings. And over here you can actually see there are some rusts on this bolts. So also, because this board uses a spray-on a grip tape, so you can actually see what's under the grip tape. And from the look of the surface under, I assume this board probably has seen some rain when it's being used. And based on the area that people usually stand on the board, like right over here, the area is pretty smooth, so it's being used pretty heavily, or shall I say pretty regularly. And over here in the front there are some slight damage over here, nothing major. On the back also some slight damage over here from like foot standing on the board. And let's see, and over here you can see some water penetration down under the board. So water probably went in from the side and went over here to the first layer of the board. If you look at the side, there are some very slight separation of the layers, the maple plies on the board. Like most noticeably the first and the second layer, there are some small gap over here, so the water has intruded the board. And with water intrusion, it actually affects the overall durability of the board. So you'll want to take note of that. Like, if you see a board that had water intrusion and it's super rusty, you can buy it, but don't spend a lot of money on the board, because this board originally it sells for over $100, and when I bought it today, it's $20. And the reason being, the board actually have some pretty obvious damage over here, like the cracks on the first layer. That's also because of the water, and sometimes it's because people tighten down the bolts too much to a point that it's creating stress on the board. So we're finished with the top surface. We're just gonna rotate on the back and then take a look. So this is the back of the board. Now the back actually doesn't look as bad as the top, so you don't see any major like dents and scratches around this area. If you see some scratches around this area, it probably means the board has been used for tricks, like on the streets. And also sometimes you can see significant scratches around those on the bottom of the truck, and that also means the board are probably being used very heavily. I wouldn't say abused, but used pretty heavily. And this board, it's pretty good. Nothing major. It just looks like the owner has been using the board for just cruising around, general use. There's no tricks or anything like that. So that is the reason I bought the board because I wanted just the extra board to just cruise around with, and I'm not going to be using this board for crazy tricks. So some of the top layer damage really doesn't affect my usage. But if you're actually buying a board to learn like crazy dance moves, so you are buying a longboard for like tricks, you don't want a board that had already exhibited damages, or the board that's showing rust, because you never know, it's probably there's probably water intrusion or damage on the board that you never know. Another thing, when you buy the longboard, sometimes you wouldn't be able to see the top surface. This one you can, but a lot of longboards have just a full cover of the black grip tape on the top. In that case, it's really hard to tell what's going on with the water damage on the top surface. So your only clue besides that would probably be just looking at the bolts over here to see if there are any rust. If the grip tape looks very new and everything else looks pretty rusty, that probably means the seller wants to hide something, wants to hide the damage on the top of the board, and that would be no good. So those are kind of couple areas to look for. And if, for example, this board that I bought, you don't see any rust, and the bearing actually all spins pretty good. Now that's another thing, so you need to make sure the bearing spins really nicely. When the board have rust, it's probably not going to be as smooth as this one. So for this board, I actually got lucky. The previous owner, which is a lady, she only used this board to cruise around, and there are no major rusts around all the bolts, and also the bearing looks to be in pretty good shape. You see a lot of like dirt over here, but if you remove the dirt, the bearing should be in pretty good shape, because those dirt means that the bearing has been lubricated and things got sticky and all stuck on the top surface of the bearings on the wheel. And so I am gonna do a restoration on all the hardwares. I'm gonna actually just lubricate all the bearings. I'm gonna actually get some grease on those bolts to make sure, you know, they stay like that and doesn't get rust. Gonna take off the truck and just recondition the truck a little bit. And the cups, I'm not sure what condition the cups is in, but when I was doing just a quick test ride on the spot, truck seems to be fine. And if you can see, it's pretty loose, so she haven't done much maintenance to the board at all. But with some proper maintenance, this board should work excellent for general use, just cruising around. And this is a 41-inch board, which is a good size for fairly open streets. If you going around campus, you might want a board that's slightly smaller, like 36-inch or even like 32. Those boards turns much faster, and so if you have a lot of people around, then you want a board that turns fairly more agile compared to those 40-inch up boards, which doesn't turn as good but super stable, and it cruises very long distance with just a single push. So I am gonna come back and show you guys after I finish restoration and tell you guys what the board could be if you spend $20 and just a few extra dollars on hardwares, that you can just restore a really a fairly gently used board to a very nice condition. Okay, I think one last thing I didn't say is also take a look at the wheels to see if there are any flat spots on the wheels. So this one doesn't have any flat spots, so it's pretty good. If you see flat spot, that probably means the guy has been doing tricks like on the board pretty heavily. Those grinding heavy spots, like when you have it and when you're riding, it's gonna make like some funny noise and it's not gonna ride as smooth. So if you have a board that's pretty good condition, no cracks, no damage, no rust, and trucks are good, there's no scratch over here, but you've seen some flat spots, that's super easy fix. Just get some new wheels. Some entry-level wheels costs like $15 to $20. You can also get those wheels used. It probably costs like $10 and up. So pretty easy to fix those flat spots. Okay, I think I covered all the things that needs to be covered. So next step, at the very end, I'm taking everything apart, I'm restoring the board, and then I'm going to show you guys what it could look like after restoration. Okay, so just to give you some close-up. Let's see. All right, so these are all the parts I've taken off from the longboard right over there, and those are the trucks. As you can see, it's in pretty okay shape. There's no significant amount of rust anywhere on the hardware, so you can only see like a little bit of the rust over here, and of course rust on these the truck mounting bolts. So that's pretty much it. Next step, I'm gonna take the bearings out, clean them one by one, and then re-lube them and put them back on the wheel, and then put everything back onto the board. So when I take those boards off the, when I took all the hardware off the board, you can see the area where the truck was mounted, the paint kind of faded away, and that's another sign that the board probably had some sort of like water intrusion over there. So because this part is always hidden, and it's really hard to see unless you take everything apart to see if there's any water damage. So I wouldn't recommend this board as your first, starter board, because apparently it requires a lot of upkeep and maintenance to make it back into working shape, and also because of the water damage, the board is compromised a little bit. So I would suggest you go out, buy a board that actually doesn't exhibit any of those damages, especially the cracks. Buy a board that seems pretty new, pretty good condition, and no rust around, and that's probably your best bet. In terms of brand, I would suggest avoid any kind of like Walmart brand boards like the Kryptonite or whatever boards that's like rimmable. Those boards uses inferior components, and I'm not sure how well those board holds up in terms of longer use and durability. The Globe, it's an Australian brand and it's been there for a while, and I've had one of the board from the Globe before. I did a review. You guys can check out the link. And just stick with some of the better known brands, like go to a skate shop or go to a skateboard website that sells all different kinds of popular brands of the boards, and then you can get one of the board that you really like if you want to go buy a new board. But if you're buying used, avoid cheap department store brands and just get a board that looks really nice, no damage. Then you should be good to go. And next step, I'm gonna remove the rust with some WD-40, and then I'm gonna re-lube everything, re-grease everything with some grease, and then we're gonna put everything back onto the board, and then I'm gonna come back and do another update. Okay guys, so I just finished restoring most of the hardware and on the board. So if you look closely, I basically removed most of the rust on the metal hardwares. So now all the parts are running pretty nice and smooth. And take a look on the back. And of course I used the Bones bearing lube, some bicycle grease for all the hardwares over here, and of course that's all the skating parts. I used the WD-40 to clean out the initial rust, and I used Goo to cleaning the wheels and the grease inside the wheels. So the wheels look pretty good now, and they all spin pretty nice. I would say this would serve as a great daily commute board. So couple remarks I want to make is, when you buy any used boards, take a note of the bearings, because this one actually came with the Globe non-serviceable bearings. So those bearings it comes with a metal cover. That cover, you can't remove it. So the best you can do is probably just put a few drops of the bearing lube through the creaks down into the bearing, but that's pretty much you can do. If you are getting a board with some nicer bearings with a rubber kind of a seal rubber cover, those bearings are much easier to service and clean, but those ones are not. But I'm glad that the bearing actually is in pretty good shape, so I don't have to do much about those. But that's something you want to take a look when you're actually buying a used board. That's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions about buying a used longboard, feel free to ask me in the comment section, and I'd be happy to answer for you guys. and hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please do hit the like button and subscribe, and I should have more similar content coming out for you guys very soon. Thank you so much, and peace, ride safe out there. Okay, take care.